dependent on others for the rest of my life. But Sir Arthur Pearson and the staff of St. Dunstan's had other plans. With their help, I knew I could be self-reliant, and I wanted to bring this idea home to Canada. I wanted Canadians to know that we could hold jobs, that we could contribute, that regardless of sight, all would read, that we, the blind, would shape our own lives, our own destiny.
Blinded by a sniper's bullet in 1915, Edwin A. Baker went on to co-found the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, shaping a path forward for the blind across Canada for generations to come.
Public transit, garbage pickup, parks and recreation programs, snow removal on your street. How can you stay informed about these and other important local services? Tune to City Council coverage on Rogers TV. See your community leaders at work on Rogers TV City Council coverage.
You're watching Rogers TV.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of NBPOLI Pod. My name's Joanna Killen. I'm here on the unceded territory of the Wolastoqey, Maliseet, and the Pescataway peoples in Mennequist, also known as St. John, New Brunswick. I'm here with my co-host, Brent Harris.
Yo.
Beatrix, as usual. And I'm so excited for today because I really just shot a dart in the dark because Knitty, who our guest is today, is one of my favorite political TikTokers. She is incredibly in-depth, and Brent's going to put up the link here. And she actually agreed to come on the podcast with us, and she's based in Alberta. I'd love you to check out her videos. She also has a podcast called The Tuesday Effect, which also goes really in-depth into Canadian political issues of the day. So we'd love
I've got
to welcome.
yes, we're gonna bring her in. Knitty, welcome. We've got
Hello.
hi. We've got quite a chat to have where we realize that you've got a limited time window for us, but I've got your TikTok across because you've got quite a following under your TikTok account, Knitty Knits.
Yeah.
How many followers are you up to now?
Over 100,000.
Okay, so we're talking virality.
Yeah,
here.
it's crazy. It's sometimes I don't realize that lots of people know me because I just have you don't realize how big your audience is, and I've definitely had some moments of people like screaming at me in a positive way and saying, "Oh my God, you're Knitty," and it's quite crazy to realize how many people have viewed your videos, or someone will send me a news article featuring one of my videos.
Oh man, no way.
Something like that. So it's pretty nuts.
That's so cool. Well, we're excited to keep the East-West connection going here for you today. We for those of us on the pod before, we've had Doug Griffiths, who was a former minister that started under Alison Redford, and then finished up under
Rachel Notley?
No, just before Rachel was
Jim Prentice.
There we are, Jim Prentice. I was getting my premiers mixed up. So anyway,
a lot of premiers in Alberta in that very short period of time.
Yeah. There's, we've got our own little history here, but it's going to be exciting, I think, for our listeners to hear because there's a lot of talk about Western alienation. Danielle Smith is sort of the main attraction right now, and so tell us a little bit about what got you motivated in politics, and then we can move into the how's it going out there conversation.
Well, I got into politics because I grew up in rural British Columbia, and I had direct ties to the reservation out there, and I spent a ton of time on reserve, and I saw the disconnect between how our police force operated in town and how our police force operated out on the reservation, and it started to really radicalize me as this little kid, and then I just continued to hyper fixate, I guess, on the bureaucracy and the differences because I felt like I kind of walked two lives. I was this white girl who would see how my friends and family were being treated because they looked different, and it just stuck with me, and I just kind of kept going in that vein. I lived on the downtown east side for quite a while and worked in Vancouver and saw a lot of really intense discrimination. And so I started to just get interested in the systems and realized how interconnected so many of those social programs are with politics. And I started to have this moment where I realized that like not all people think everyone deserves human rights, and I couldn't understand why that was weird. And so I started to try and figure out why we have these systems, why people act like that. And I just got really obnoxious and wouldn't shut up about it, and now I have a platform. So
as we all, it's the millennial dream right there. That's just how we all ended up here. It's so
pretty
good.
much. Yeah, pretty much.
So have you ever been active in a partisan way?
I did, sort of. So I ran for the federal NDP in my riding because my riding is very focused in agriculture. I owned a restaurant for 5 years. I was working frontline with farmers. I've been involved in ag as well. Like, it's a whole thing. And the person who was running it's a super safe blue seat. I don't think he's a great representation of our community. I don't think he represents what agriculture actually is. And so my riding has an issue with a lot of parachute candidates. So we get a lot of like paper candidates because it is such a safe blue riding. And so the NDP had actually written an article in our local newspaper begging anybody to step up and run. And I was like, you know what? I was a debate champion.
Go get it.
Pissed off. I'm super well known in my community. I know all of these farmers. I'll give it a shot. I only had 3 weeks to run.
Yeah.
It was during the pandemic.
Oh, so Joe and I know that story. We did the same thing.
We know.
Yeah.
I couldn't even door knock. It was a whole thing. I had 10 signs and a TikTok, and I doubled the NDP vote. And it was the first time that my countermate, who ultimately won, it was the first time that he ever had to like put in work at the debate. And really, we left as equals. We shook hands after, and he said, you know, I'm really proud of you for doing this. And this was really refreshing to see this example. And it got a lot of people talking and kind of realizing that there are options outside of that. And I don't feel like democracy is not having an option on the ballot. And I was so frustrated that my riding didn't even have a viable option. It would be some random staffer from Edmonton who'd get plunked on the ballot. So I just wanted to be a voice of the people in my community, and I know my community very well. And it was crazy. And a ton of people were like, your restaurant's going to tank, everyone's going to hate you. And it actually increased the volume at our restaurant. And it was a really cool community building experience, but I will literally never do it again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's an incredible journey. Like, it's so funny. Our story is almost identical because I did the same for the Green Party in our riding here in St. John. It was like no one ever really took it seriously. And then we really doubled down because, you know, we've had people from Fair Vote Canada on the podcast here before. We're super big on proportional representation. That is just an obvious value, I guess, of this podcast. So, I mean, that is wild. Like we're dealing with a situation right now where the Conservatives are flying in folks to run around here. And that's really pissing people off, like really, really badly.
Well, we had the other kind of reason why I couldn't handle it is because we had no NDP representative. We had a Liberal candidate that nobody knew. We had a Green candidate who didn't even live here. But then we had the Maverick Party, the PPC Party, and the Conservative Party. And I was like, we cannot be the riding in Canada that has the PPC or Maverick Party second. My goal is to be solidly second and show that we're not just full of hate. I cannot let this happen. And I did it. That was my goal. I did it. It worked really well. It was so funny to watch people be like, I can't believe you didn't win. And I was like, I barely tried. I showed up 3 seconds before a federal election. What were we expecting to happen here? Yeah. But I just did not want my riding to be the one riding in Canada that was like conservative PPC.
Yeah, Maverick Party. That's wild.
So
well, you know, this is an interesting time we're in. And so there's all kinds of issues we could dive into. But I think what would be helpful, like if there's one goal that we've had on this pod, and you'll see Joe periodically sort of hop off to go.
I get
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So her and I are a Brady bunch essentially. We have Beatrix together, and then I have 5, and she's or 4, and she's got one of her own. So it's quite a fun little environment. So Beatrix is always a feature on the pod, but right now in Canada at the federal level, we're having a conversation, and you're just seeing this transformational sort of intrigue in Mark Carney, and yet, which seems to be driven by the fact that Pierre Poilievre just looks like he's a lone ranger. You know, he can't get the premier of Ontario on his side. They hate each other by all rumors, and you know. The insider scoop there is so funny to listen to because Corey Tenayk and Jenny Byrne and Pierre Poilievre all dated, and they're all like,
it's very tempestuous.
Yeah, and you're just like, okay, so Jenny's running the national campaign for Pierre, and Jenny and Corey probably don't get along anymore because they, used to. I don't know. It's just like. Anyway, so it's crazy that they've been able to sway so far, but it does seem like for the first time since 1967, the Liberals could have the best result they've ever had in Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Polls have been absolutely insane. And my riding, I look at Vote Smart. I see I'm going to be blue for the foreseeable future. It's the running joke of like, maybe I should move. But there are a lot of spaces. I just realized this is on. There are a lot of spaces in Alberta that are really flipping and are going to have very viable Liberal candidates, including my own riding. There is an extremely viable Liberal candidate. And if he gains some traction, I think he actually stands a chance because he is picking up the slack where our current MP is dropping it. And he's got experience in ag, and he's got this history, and he's anchored to Alberta. And it's really the first time that I've seen Alberta Conservatives panicking. It's the first time that I've seen them kind of going, this I could actually have a contender here. Wow. And there's already just so many signs of our current sitting MP. He's out in full force. He's trying to win votes. But a lot of people are really turned off with the behavior. And my MP, John Barlow, is one of Pierre Poilievre's inner circle guys. And he's constantly sharing memes, and he's constantly degrading Justin Trudeau. And even his own Facebook is starting to be like, enough is enough, John. Like, this is not acceptable. Yeah, it really, truly is. And these are people who have voted for him historically, consistently. They've thrown $100 at him. They are conservative supporters, and they're starting to say, so
this is real. This isn't polling real. Weird.
This is not some kind of media spin. This is actively happening, boots on the ground. People are really disgusted. And even at an MLA level, we're noticing it as well. Like our local MLA, we have like a big festival that happens, and the NDP were at the festival this year, and it's in winter, and it's super Gilmore Girls, and there's fire pits everywhere, and they give out hot chocolate and all that kind of stuff. And the NDP were on one side of the street, packed. Everybody was chatting around the fire, and then he was across the street trying to give away goodie bags, and no one would go talk to him. And we were just sitting there like watching this happen, and a lot of people are holding him to account and are saying, I don't like what you're saying, I don't like what you're doing. I don't know if you followed the whole saga of the UCP MLA Jennifer Johnson, who
I heard some stories out of the UCP stuff. Is that the person who came from Wild Rose, or what was
they all like that's a whole mess. Jennifer Johnson's the one who compared trans kids to poop cookies, like having in cookies. Sorry for my swear.
Well, no, you can swear on the pod. It's fine. Okay, yes, I do remember something.
She got kicked out. She was an independent, and our MLA moved mountains to get her back in, and actually passed an amendment to like try to let her back in. And it's this like anti-cancel culture amendment that they passed at their general election, and or their annual general meeting. And everybody in our community went, pardon? and it's really biting him in the butt. And so even these people, like my old neighbor said, I don't understand any of this gender stuff. I don't think I ever will, but I just want everyone to feel safe and welcome. And we're getting there. We're doing it. It's actually happening. So who knows? Who knows what we're going to see? And there's also a lot of people who are really mad about Danielle Smith going down to the US, engaging Donald Trump, the Breitbart interview, really bitter.
Ben Shapiro and the fundraisers.
Like all this stuff. She's doing all of these things. It's definitely biting her in the butt, but it's also blowing back on Pierre Poilievre because Danielle is one of the conservative premiers who said, I stand with Pierre Poilievre. So he's getting really screwed over by what she's doing, and he can't distance himself at this point in time. So it's going to be really interesting to see how her actions impact the federal campaign.
I think it's over.
I do too.
I'm just imagining, like, what could Pierre Poilievre do right now
to win?
If he, like, I was thinking the other day, like, if he came out and he acted like he had a lot of contrition and congratulated on Prime Minister Mark Carney on doing a good job for Canada and have the classic, Turner Mulrooney thing, sir, we may disagree on the fundamentals of where this country needs to go, but we certainly agree that Canada needs to be strong, like stuff like that. But there's none of that would make sense for Pierre for him to do it. But like, that's what it would take. It would take him completely 180ing on everything.
And he's pigeonholed himself into too much of a corner. His entire campaign and his entire political career has been based on fear and hate. So if he came out and tried to have a peaceful moment and a come together moment, his supporters would go, what? And it would be worse than trying to hold on to this like anger and hatred that he's really festering. And even like, I get it all the time. Every time that I go a little too hard on Pierre Poilievre, I get death threats. I get sued. I get all that kind of stuff. So he's really surrounded himself with a base of supporters that is kind of a problem for him. And it's not the same conservative party it used to be. It has gone so far in a different direction that this is 100% just my personal viewpoint. I feel like our current liberals are what the progressive conservatives used to be. And I feel like the ideology has shifted quite far over. And I think a lot of that progressive conservative vote is very comfortable voting for Mark Carney. Very comfortable voting for Mark Carney.
That is the thing. Like, we saw it here in New Brunswick as well. We had a Premier Higgs who was very, very much attending all of the events in Alberta.
Oh yeah, getting fundraising out west.
Yeah.
The first 2 years of this podcast is basically a anti-Higgs agenda. But like, so now that but the Liberals had to concede to a bunch of conservative ideologies of, the former Conservative Party, like, let's say 20 years ago. And so we see them as centrist now, and we've been very like critical of the Liberals as well, because they offer, a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of promises and things like that. And then we get there, and then it's that the other reason why we can't do it, right? So, and we've been following that closely here at NB, but it was very much a vitriolic reaction to Higgs that the Liberals came in with a landslide here in New Brunswick.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is, like, yes, the Conservatives write bad bills. I think a lot of their bills are quite bad, and they're quite focused on corporate interests, but so do the Liberals. And an example that I have that a lot of people don't even realize as an example is when the NDP brought forward a bill to protect the language around reproductive access, reproductive health care, and access to abortion. So they didn't want to put any legislation around abortion itself. It was about how it's a human right to have access to it. And it was very people focused. It was 100% ensuring that people have access to reproductive health care, people first. At the exact same time, the Liberals put forward a bill because there is a very lengthy history of a nonprofit that pretends to be a women's health clinic, reproductive health clinic, but they're not. It is Christian fundamentalists who
pregnancy resource centers.
Yes.
So, what's funny about that? I used to work at one. And I used to mentor dads and, people in that. And you're 100% right there. And we've talked about it on this pod, and you mentioned being sued, and that was part of another little piece. When I talked about that. But anyway, continue on. That's good.
Well, the Liberals at the exact same time brought forward a bill to try to shut down these clinics, but what they were actually trying to do is just push out a bad actor in the nonprofit sector. And they wanted to ensure that corporate interests were protected, because if you have somebody who's abusing the nonprofit corporation structure, it looks bad on all of them. So it was very focused on pushing them out as a corporation, and the human value was kind of secondary to getting rid of a bad corporation. So it was corporate interest first with a trickle-down effect of human rights, but it wasn't actually people-focused in any way, shape, or form.
No, and in this election too, I've put out a few. I don't have 100,000 followers on TikTok. I have 5,000 followers on TikTok.
Hey, we got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm so it's usually it's me as a talking head, but I don't keep up with enough. But on my other socials, I've written a lot about housing, and it's the one issue where if you want to know if the Liberals are still neoliberal in their approach in an era that has demonstrated to us that neoliberalism will kill us all if we continue to have it as our main economic thought and preference model, like that, if you want to know if the Liberals are serious about changing anything for improvement, you have to look at housing. And I, honest to God, like, Carney wants to do all this transformative work, but when you look at the root of the Liberal Party, they're having a difficult time separating themselves from the types and approaches to our economic structures that would be different than what a conservative, or a Brian Mulroney conservative, or a Stephen Harper conservative, like they're two wings of the same bird. They're both quite right leaning. And we've never seen Mark Carney, dive into that really in a way that's.
I struggle a lot because I am concerned that when I'm critical of Mark Carney, it gets weaponized by Pierre Poilievre supporters. And I feel a little strangled because on one hand, I'm extremely critical of Mark Carney, but I also accept the fact that if I have to pick between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, it's a very easy choice for me.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Mark Carney was in control of a $200 billion real estate portfolio for a multi-billion-dollar company. He's not somebody who's going to ensure that people are the center of the housing conversation. There's always going to be profitability, and that's not what works, and that's not what got us to the point that we succeeded in housing. And there's a Tuesday Effect episode specifically about this, because everybody blames Justin Trudeau. Oh, our housing crisis is from Justin Trudeau. It started in the 80s. It was changes to the National Housing Act. We know the exact time when this started to happen.
It was 1989. It was the year I was born.
It was.
I was referencing you in a few podcasts ago because I watched your video about that, and it's just how they just gutted it, defunded, if you will.
We walked into the 80s as the gold standard of how to house a population, and we walked out of the 80s in a housing crisis, all because of legislation changes in 1985. And as soon as those changes happened, it was this perfect snowball. And we were really successful at having federal backed housing and ensuring that we had enough houses for every person who lived in Canada. They were affordable. And a huge part of the reason why the 90s was such a suppressed housing market is because we had hundreds of thousands of federal units that entered the private market. So it was
exactly. We gave it, and the provinces vacated that space as soon as the federal government did. And you look at that and you think, why would the market ever want to create a situation of surplus? I don't know about anybody else, but I took Economics 101. And if you are in charge of an industry, you don't want a proliferation of the product so you can control the profit margins.
Exactly.
It's the only way you get an appropriate housing system is if you have pretty mass and wide scale government intervention. Exactly. So Joe and I have talked about this so many times on this pod, and we've authored a little resolution at council to try to get a housing corporation established.
Mhm.
Our city actually has the country's first municipal housing corporation that was
That's
developed in the
Yeah.
30s. But we've walked so far from that. When you talk to people, they just go, but you look at the liberal and conservatives and you say,
And
okay,
they're
what's
they're
the
super
difference?
similar. Yeah, they're super similar. They're both offering the same options. They're both basically doing the same thing. I kind of just view it as capitalism with fancy socks. You
Yeah.
know, the liberals are just giving us some like fun, entertaining socks to wear, whereas the conservatives are more stuffy. They're basically the exact same housing plan.
Yeah.
And it's pretty, I'm pretty disappointed. I can actually believe how far the conservatives have fallen, but I think it's quite shocking to see it so blatant and to see so much hatred has got into even just their policies and their declarations, and the hypocrisy within it is quite astonishing to me. But I feel like the liberals also have a lot of problems within their own party right now at a federal level, and it's pretty chaotic. And I've got a lot of questions that aren't being answered.
Yeah.
But I do think that Justin Trudeau stepping down was the smartest decisions.
Oh, it'll be, everything that we hoped for Joe Biden that wasn't, right? It has completely reinvigorated. Like we're one of two provinces in the country that knows what it looks like to have a sweep.
Mhm.
Right. So, in the 90s, Frank McKenna won every seat in the province. There was no official opposition. And the only other place to happen, I think, is the Yukon. But I look at this and I don't think we can get to a sweep, but it is
pretty darn close.
Do you think so? Is it two seats that the Liberals could win in Alberta, or is it 10?
Well, and that's
or five. Sorry, 5.
That's kind of the thing. I keep seeing 3, like a solid 3, which would be actually kind of crazy. But I think the more Danielle Smith talks, the more Donald Trump talks, the less Mark Carney talks, and the more Pierre Poilievre talks. It's going to be really interesting. And the thing that makes Alberta kind of a wild card is we have a very large Hutterite, Mennonite, that whole community, and we never fully know how they're going to vote. And they have traditionally always voted conservative, predominantly because of like queer rights. That has been the thing. But those communities are starting to get really progressive. And so they used to be really considered like Luddite communities that don't care about tech. And they're turning to green energy for their farms, and they're sending generations to university, and those generations are coming back and saying like human rights are not what's destroying society. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that community specifically. Rural farming communities in Alberta are extremely polarized, and we don't have a great data set. So it could actually be 10 seats. It could, we don't know. We don't know what's going on in the next, you could see Alberta completely flip-flop. Who knows? Because there's not great polling, there's not great connection to those communities, and they have been kind of forgotten by the current conservative administration at a provincial and federal level. So I'm really curious what happens. I do think you're going to see some ridings that are for the first time ever close.
Right.
And I think that's going to be really telling to the future of Alberta for sure. Like,
and so these folks will get out to vote, because like that's interesting. Like that's not like they're interested in the political process. Interesting.
They generally are, because they're protecting the farm,
right?
Protecting their industry.
And you talk about the ag industry a lot. Is that because the ag industry you talk about the ag industry like we talk about the seafood industry out here?
There's a lot of parallels, though. There are a lot of parallels. It's something that I grew up in. So I have a lot of family in like big canola, and I've got a sister who's in cattle. I've got the whole shebang. And then just working in industry. I worked for pretty large corporate food entities trying to bring food from the US into Canada. I owned my own restaurant. Like this is my whole history. I'm married to a chef. I can't just I want to escape it.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm really, really passionate about it. And a lot of people don't understand how weird of an industry it is and how abusive of an industry it is and how it's truly on the verge of collapse and it's not doing well. And actually a lot of the stuff that you saw through the 80s and 90s with the overfishing of the Maritimes and the collapse of the industry, you're starting to see that on a very massive scale across food.
Well, this is, I followed George Monbiot for a long time. He talks about the food systems and how, he talks about stats like there's only 10 years of viable phosphorus left, which is and that was like 3 years ago. We're down like 7 years of phosphorus. I don't know. But like you see these UN declarations come out about, and then you look at you say, okay, how do liberal and conservatives show competency? Well, they respond to the needs of the day and they look to what's coming down the pipe and they prepare a society to face it. And it's we've never seen anybody, adjust their agricultural policies or, try to, like right now, my industry. So I swing a hammer for a living. And right now, everybody wants to talk about the trade sector. Everybody wants to talk about construction capacity because there's a housing crisis. And y'all ain't solving it unless you get somebody like me to swing a hammer at it. That's the first time ever. Like that's never been the case for 30 years. And I feel like, we look at New Brunswick and 100 years ago, we used to farm 42% of our arable land. It's now 4%. And we only have 4 food groups that we actually harvest enough of to feed ourselves on, which is potatoes, blueberries, maple syrup, and salmon. And you think, we can't be the exception to the rule. It must be that this is something everybody's facing. So tell me about that. Like when you talk about some of that edge of collapse, what do you mean? Like what's happening in the agricultural sector?
So what I've seen, this is all just my firsthand experience. And part of the reason why I'm really curious to see what the Mennonite and Hutterite community do is they realized they can't afford input farming 15 years ago. And you're seeing rural agriculture pulling arable land offline and working with fungal experts to basically regenerate and regrow their soil because they cannot afford input farming, meaning you dump a crap ton of fertilizer on it, you're paying every year for seeds, all of that stuff. The ag industry is realizing it's not doing okay. The math isn't working any longer. The cost of your inputs is surpassing the cost of what you're producing. And we also have a lot of issues with our actual grocery supply system in Canada because Canadian crops can't get to Canadian grocery stores. So most of our ag products are exported out of Canada because there is no shelf for those products.
Yeah, they can't be processed here.
They cannot. Well, we're making everything. We're doing everything here, but you can't get on a shelf because Loblaws wants to charge you $1 million for a SKU. You have a cash for access problem. You have issues with just all of it. You've got issues with input farming. You've got issues with water access. Here in the province of Alberta, they were supposed to deal with a bunch of irrigation issues and get more water access. They didn't. It was a false promise. And now they're looking at allowing an Australian company to come in and reactivate a coal mine that will contaminate one of the largest aquifers in southern Alberta. And southern Alberta is a key growing region for full food supply. And so the farmers in this area are like, what are you doing? What is going on here? And it's very real. And also just the quality of the product has decreased quite dramatically over the last 5 years. So just think of an apple. You go to bite in an apple and you're super excited about it and it tastes like dirt and it's super mealy and it's not consistent because the soil is changing. So the finished fruit product is changing.
Yeah.
It's spending too much time in transport. There's too many restrictions to try and get it to a shelf, to get it to a consumer. So you're starting to see a decrease in food quality, an increase in cost, and issues with volume of product being produced. And we also just dramatically overproduce as a globe. We're seeing huge volumes of food waste that isn't getting turned back into any type of usable product. It's not getting composted. It's not going back to the soil. It's going to a landfill and being buried in the earth to never re-enter the cycle. So it's it's really bad. Like, I'm not trying to be a doomsdayist, but it's really
No, we've been doomsday on this pod for a while now.
it's really bad. And
Yeah.
if my husband was here, you would have to hear his entire rant about food quality and how everything tastes like.
No, but it's true. And
about it. And
Yes.
yeah, it's.
and I attempted to get into the regenerative agricultural space, even out here, on a small scale, right? And when you get down into understanding how it's like you really are just returning to what worked for thousands of years,
Yeah.
what was intrinsic knowledge with population. But where it gets doomsday for me is, 60 years ago when we had victory gardens during World War II, 70 years ago, sorry, there was still a level of knowledge in the society that was viable. That you could ask people to grow some potatoes and carrots in their backyard, and you couldn't now. You couldn't now, and if you could, you got situations like ours here in St. John, where we've got this massive recycling. It's called AIM Recycling, another billionaire in our province, and it was a massive fire, and it polluted the topsoil within a 30-mile radius of the whole town. It ruined entire crop, and it's like, and so this is. So I guess leading to a question, because you got to go in 5 minutes. I don't know if you had a question, Joe. I've already asked a bunch of questions.
No, you go ahead. This is I'm just wrangling this wrangler of
I know.
being here. Yeah.
Very cute.
So
Keeping up.
So Mark Carney's a viable choice.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any hope that Mark Carney is actually going to fix a problem?
Yeah, be like the change maker, because we've been really grappling with the fact that he's kind of talking a big transformational change game here, and the current Liberal Premier of New Brunswick did the same thing, and now it's having to walk back a lot of stuff. So, do you believe Mark Carney? Like, do you believe that he's going to follow through with what he says?
Because it sounds like you're saying, the Conservatives aren't going to do it, and they haven't done it.
100%. Yeah.
And you have to vote for Carney because there's no other viable candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you think it goes?
I'm really legitimately concerned that we're going to see Mark Carney get into an Obama situation where he promises a ton of change and then literally can do none of those things. And I think that that's the realistic outcome. I do think that he stands a chance of getting some more financial stability for Canadians, because I think if he is who he's presenting himself to be, he stands a chance of using the systems that he knows against themselves to benefit.
That he built. Yep.
But my issue is he built them, and he had the opportunity to do really incredible progressive things. And instead he just figured out how to make a ton of money off of green technology. And I don't necessarily think that is great. I think that it's just the green version of the Conservative Party. So what we saw with hyper-investment into oil and gas and energy resources through the 80s and 90s, I'm concerned he's just that, but with like a leaf on the logo. I don't necessarily think that we're going to see a lot of difference. I think we stand a chance. And my dream scenario, which is it's not going to happen, but I like to pretend like maybe this will happen. My dream Canadian government would be a Liberal NDP minority government where the NDP could focus on the human value of Canadians, while the Liberals could focus on the economic values, and they could work together to fund human-focused legislation. But that's probably not going to happen because Canada is, 7 companies in a trench coat pretending to be a country at this point.
Joanna talks about that. And we're the worst. You know what? We are out here in New Brunswick. We're the worst example of it. We literally have, the lowest wages in the country, the worst social outcomes, the most billionaires per capita. And it's just, and then it's
and then, you know what?
People move here from Alberta and they're like, where the hell is your public service? And we're like,
we don't have it. There's no money.
Thing. We've given all of our money to the billionaires.
It's kind of happening in Alberta too. The exact same stuff is happening where, like, Alberta is one of the only provinces that still has its own bank. We have
Yeah.
the Alberta Treasury branch. And what continues to happen and has been happening since, the 90s is the conservative government will help their friends get very large loans that their friends cannot afford to pay. And then ATB will take the loss and then the taxpayer will bail them out. And so what we've seen, especially during the pandemic, and again, this is just my firsthand experience. I have so many friends who either had their loans called or their interest was dramatically increased by ATB Financial because they were a small business struggling during the pandemic. But then ATB just increased the amount of lending that they will provide to corporations. And almost all of it is earmarked for foreign cryptocurrency companies.
Oh my gosh.
Kevin O'Leary's data center to the tune of billions of dollars. So my friend who has like an ice cream shop is drowning under $40,000 of debt, but we're going to hand a foreign company that plays with monopoly money $2 billion. It's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah, no, we have currently set aside $150 million for tariff relief here in New Brunswick. And we just are like, oh, okay, so that'll go to the Five Guys that have these big companies, because nobody is really struggling with the tariff realities unless you're a large player here.
Very large company. We get a lot of stuff in Alberta where there'll be a federal program that's trying to work with all Canadians, and Danielle Smith will stop it. So we have AISH, like the Alberta Assisted that stuff. And this AISH program was offered a $200 top up from the federal government. So it would take it from $1,900 to, from 21 to 23 or something like that. And Danielle Smith decided to decrease AISH by $200 per month per person because now the feds are going to pay for it. So now you're still at $2,100. You're not getting $2,300 a month. And then all of the landlords and all of the people who are providing services to the disabled community jacked up their prices. So now AISH recipients are in a worse condition than they were before. Why would you do that?
Wow.
What's the logic behind that? And a lot of Albertans we've been able to access it for a little bit, but we're going to lose the dental benefit because she doesn't want the federal government stepping in. And just a lot of tit for tat and refusing to work collaboratively. But the only way that Canada has worked in the past was because we had a connection between federal, provincial, and municipal governments actually working together.
Well, we've talked about it on this pod, and we talked about at the start. Alberta's oil sector was built through the Atlantic Investment Corridor from between Halifax, St. John, Montreal, and the engineering firm that literally pioneered the process of oil extraction that happens on the tar sands was a person from Upper Canada. It's from Central Ontario. So it's one of those things where you see Danielle Smith threatening this national unity crisis unless these things happen. But I wonder if they haven't just overplayed their hand with this raw confidence. Like here out east, at least we did have a Harper representation in Parliament, so we have gone conservative. But I feel like if you're a conservative riding in Alberta, you haven't had to do the hard work to kind of predict and prepare for the future and to develop alternatives to somebody because you're going to win. And I wonder if this isn't the time when that conservative assumption just collapses.
And that's a big issue that she's running into. And even with our oil and gas sector and with the demand letter that she wrote of Mark Carney, she was asking for things that she cannot get that are kind of ridiculous. But also she's backing on the fact that she has this billion-dollar industry. But the reality is the ownership of that industry left the Alberta government a very long time ago. And a lot of the only safety nets that are remaining are federal. So if you don't have a relationship with your federal government, you don't have a leg to stand on. We can't even get them to pay their back taxes. There's hundreds of millions of dollars in municipal taxes that oil and gas companies are delinquent on, and we're never going to get back. we have a multi-trillion-dollar cleanup issue with abandoned wells in this.
Yeah, I know. We gave a bunch of taxpayer money to help clean up your wells.
Exactly. So it's a pretty bad situation, but I'm really curious to see. It feels like, and it's just my opinion, that we're screaming into the void a little bit, the UCP party, and I think it's going to bite them in the butt.
Okay.
I think this could be it for the UCP party, or they're going to glass cliff themselves, get out of Dodge, hand a really crappy economy to the NDP, and then sit in the corner screaming about how the NDP screwed everything up. So.
Oh, Groundhog Day. That's what we call it.
Yeah.
I digress. I do have to go.
Thank you so much.
We really, thank you so much. We'll be circling back to you soon.
Sounds good.
See you later. Peace. Bye. It's funny because when she was talking, I was remembering all the things that I've said on this podcast that I was literally referencing things she had done research on and looked up. Like, I love a gal who will do her homework. It's just, I thought she was an incredible person to connect with today. So what do you think?
She's got so much intrinsic knowledge on the Alberta rural situation. I had never thought to consider some of these different groups that are out there, like the Hutterites, the Mennonites, that they're not Amish, right? A lot of people, I forgot my mic's way over here. They're not Amish, and so they do have technology. They do use electricity. They're not that far, but they have some pretty fundamentalist views in the world from a Christian theological perspective. So when she brought them up and she said, "Look, there's a chance these folks are shopping around because they're not idiots. They've seen these conservative politicians fail them on their agricultural policies for years and put the industry into a stranglehold for corporate interests like Monsanto." Like, people have to remember, Alberta is the only place where a collective of farmers sued Monsanto and won.
Right. But I think she also highlighted the really critical piece there, which is the relationship with the big grocers. That's not healthy.
You go into a grocery store and you see this product made in Canada, right? You tally up all those made in Canada products and you have to ask yourself one question: what could be on the shelf?
Right.
Versus what is. Sure, there's lots of made in Canada signs. We see them. But
it's like a massive American brand with a Canadian manufacturing plant, Yeah. So yes, it is made in Canada, but profited by Canadians, maybe a different sort of way to frame it.
Yeah. And do these grocery stores have any sort of national security mandate? No, they haven't made it make money. This is the thing. This is why, Mark McKelman joked about me being a communist in that follow-up discussion. It's like issues of food, military, and shelter, and to some extent manufacturing, are really the only industries around. I guess you have to say logistics too. We do have to say like those are national security level industries, that we just don't treat that way. And so you got to wonder, is like Mark Carney actually, like, I saw that he got his rally up in Kitchener. He got quite a few hecklers.
Oh, I have not seen that.
Yeah, people being like, how many, minors did you rape on Epstein's Island and all this stuff.
Oh my God.
Right in the middle of his, but like, this is where Carney is vulnerable.
Yeah.
He is definitely a grassroots guy, comes from Northwest Territories, worked his way up. But for 30 years, he's been representing, like she said, billion-dollar companies with hundreds of billions of dollars in assets, and a lot of it's Canadian real estate, which is a hot market that's made his portfolio a lot of money.
How do you go to your friends and say, no, you know what, I'm going to make policy for these guys over here instead of you guys who I've been working with for decades?
Well, and this is a conversation that I saw come up today on St. John News Chasers. For those of you who are wondering what happened to Loyalist City News Chasers, we don't know, but
I know. Okay. They posted a Telegraph. So they posted someone posted a Telegraph Journal news article verbatim, and Post Media sent thing to Facebook and got it entirely shut down. So again, like, blame big business for the demise of a small town
journalism
news chaser. But that one was along for the longest. I feel like it was one of the first ones that ever did exist. So that's it was a pretty big deal that it came down. But now, of course, they've revitalized themselves. There's a whole new bunch of rules. Number one rule, no posting media articles on that site.
So so don't worry, folks. You are not allowed to get media unless you pay for it. And
right.
You won't,
no news.
And if you do pay for it, you will not be able to talk about it on social media because they won't pay for it.
Right.
God, that's just, anyway.
It's so sad. It's so sad because, no one's navigating to these actual websites to do that. And you can't view our local newspaper without paying anyway. So
no. Anyway, so Loyalist City's down and then back. But, the big thing I noticed on there was somebody asking the question, when you look at the salary and the travel allowance and the office allowance and stuff like that, meals, the average salary of an MP is $203,000 a year.
Not to mention, like you say, the plane tickets, the meals,
that's 6 times what the average individual makes.
Yes, because they're not paying for any of those.
So here's a question. We're going to poll the audience this week. When times are hard and times are good, shouldn't your members of parliament be bound to those outcomes? So let's give it a percentage. Let's say the average member of parliament is only entitled to make a certain amount of the average income of a constituent in their riding. So if the average income is $42,000 or $48,000, they have to live off $48,000, or they have to figure out how to bring policy in to increase the living standards. Let's give it maybe the floor is 65,000, right? So you say your floor is 65,000, but you're only allowed to make a maximum of this much. We based on rewards, whatever the case may be. Like it's one of these things where I look around and I think, how are we asking Canadians and people to respond to this crisis, to start businesses, take risks, grow crops, build housing, when the politicians are running off with 6 times their salary, CEOs are running off with 500 times their salary? How do you not bundle them all up into the same group? And, you see people's counter argument being, well, you need to have quality people. Do you think? I was
just going to say the quality people thing.
Yeah. Do you think the level of service that a constituent you as a constituent, do you think Wayne Long is your representative?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the quality of your service in your relationship and ability to interact with and access him and his ability to show up on time and attend meetings, read briefings, formulate opinions, educate himself on topics, do you think that would change if he had a PhD?
I mean, no, it's like we all know that those who mostly go on to get PhDs in most fields these days end up with, $60,000 professor salaries at a university, right? So we're not measured by our intelligence or our ability to be educated.
Well, right. So we don't pick our politicians that way either.
No, but Wayne often says, it's funny, I thought about this because he said, this is, you're applying for a job, like here's the resume kind of thing. And we've said this many times that doesn't matter, like that. It's not really.
That's a technocracy. If we had a technocracy and we basically said, well, whoever's got the best resume gets to represent us. First of all, based on what? What's the job description?
Mm-hmm.
What are you actually doing that requires? Is there certification that you need? That'd be cool. Do you have to pass a test? That'd be cool. But like, you could literally elect a idiot. And we've got plenty of them. as examples of people who are absolute garbage human beings with terrible outlooks, couldn't defend themselves, out of a wet paper bag when it comes to an argument, whether, on any topic, but yet they're the representative.
Absolutely.
So we're not like the idea that you're only going to, we got to have a high pay scale to, attract quality workers. We're not hiring people. You're not. It's not a job description. It's a vibe check. It's a vibe choice. Two parties get the advantage on the vibes check because they're the ones that always win. And so they're the winning teams that attract the biggest amount of fans. And whoever puts the person with the better vibes in front of them wins usually.
Which actually perfectly leads to the poll that you're about to show.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because the vibe changed. The vibe switch up happened when Trump came in.
That's
Polyev
right.
was riding high. He was feeling good.
So,
and here we are.
Shout out to our friend, Philip Fournier, as well as Eric Grenier at the RIP podcast. Let's just zoom in here so you can see what we're looking at. I'm not going to show you his whole article. I just want to show you his collection. He's got a poll tracker. They've got a podcast. So we've got a seat by seat projection here. I'm going to get to the poll tracker here in a second, but just so you can get a quick peek at today's, look, this is every single seat in the country broken down.
Red. Broken
down. So if you're interested, if you're looking for, so let's look at the poll tracker based on this. So we have, looks like, this is in the past. That's right too. He has also got, hey, how did we do in the past? The poll tracker in 2021, how did it do? And there's lots of kinds of stuff you can find for analysis, which is great. So this is the crazy part is in January 5th, the Conservatives were set to win a lot of seats, like 220 seats. We are now looking at Carney leading in the polls by 3.3%, which for the Liberals, because they have such an efficient vote, because the Conservatives tend to, although it might not be true anymore, according to Knitty Knits, the Conservatives, I don't know if you can see the seat by, or what are you looking at right now? You're looking at the wrong thing. I wanted to show you the poll tracker. Just one second. If the Conservatives tend to run up the vote in Alberta, so that gives them these big wins out there. But according to Knitty Knits, that might not happen. And you're starting to see Carney enter territory that suggests they are going to win a ridiculous amount of seats. It'll be a bigger majority than what we saw with Justin Trudeau's first order of government.
Well, I love what you said about what they can all do, which is keep talking Danielle, keep talking Pierre, shut up, Mark, keep talking Trump. And it's true. It's like the alternative to what we're witnessing now and what our version of it is just so overwhelming that Mark Carney is really being handed something spectacular on a silver platter with this.
Yep. The Conservatives cannot win government right now, even in their best sense of the outcome. So the way, this is CBC Poll Tracker, which Eric Grenier does, who's part of the RIT, which is why I'm saying go to the source, go to the RIT podcast, because there's so much stuff on there. He's got a Substack. But right now, even if they exceed expectations based on the polling data, they still don't win government. They might win more seats than the Liberals, but who's their dance partner? But we're seeing the opportunity for a complete collapse. They're projecting 1 to 6 seats for the NDP.
I heard a commentator saying that really they have absolutely, and you see in the polls, they've gouged the NDP entirely. Like of course, the Conservatives, but they are gutting Jagmeet's party at this point.
But you can't stand up in front of people with a 3-piece Armani suit and a Rolex watch and say that you're going to rein in the big bankers and say that you need to be the one. Like, I get his story about why he does that, and it's a pretty inspiring story. Jagmeet Singh's a pretty inspiring story actually behind him, and looking after his brother, working 2 jobs, going through law school. He feels at home in that suit. He feels like people take him seriously in that suit. He saved up his money, but the guy's a millionaire now. And he's been a millionaire for at least 7 years.
Yeah.
I just, you can't put people like this. Is why Pierre Poilievre has collapsed, because he wasn't a serious person. He was a cartoon character. He was a villain that became the good guy for a lot of people. The villain that we needed, and then all of a sudden, nobody believes him.
Yeah.
Like, compared to Mark Carney, who's going to go out on the ice and skate with the Edmonton Oilers and and can deliver a 20-point PowerPoint in incredibly technologically sound language with all of the different data sets to support his statements. Pierre Poilievre sounds like an absolute cartoon character, and
he pales in comparison to the brevity that Carney offers, and he doesn't speak to you like you're a demi. He's speaking to you with compassion and care and knowledge and all of that. So I mean, I've been really interested watching him speak. Actually, it's been quite stunning. And just now we've heard that Trump feels he had a very productive conversation with Prime Minister Carney. So we will see where that brings us in the next few days. But that literally just came out a few minutes ago. So we shall see. And we will be back here next week to unpack it
all over again. Hopefully we have a couple. We're looking on a couple of guests. We've got one today. That's great. We're going to get a few more, hopefully, before the end of this election season. Hopefully we'll do a watch party. Maybe we'll do an NBPOLI pod watch party for the federal election.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. So let us know what you think. Should MPs get paid less? I say yes. We'll see what you guys say, and we'll talk to you in 7 days.
See you soon.
This is Rogers TV. The following program was provided by a valued member of our local community. Rogers TV is proud to support local producers and share local voices, ideas, and opinions. For more information, please visit our website.
Welcome to the Lou and Sue podcast,
where we chat about life, love, and what we've learned.
So grab your cutest mug
and join us.
Hi. Welcome to the Lou and Sue podcast. We want to do a different segment once in a while here and there. We like to read books, and the ones that are standing out to us a lot, we want to do a bit of a review. So we're going to...
And what we've learned from it.
Yeah, what stood out to us.
How it helped us grow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And why we suggest it for you if you're interested in it.
Yeah.
I think we're going to call it the Lou and Sue Book Club.
Like the Oprah Book Club.
Yeah, the Oprah, yeah.
Except way less people in this club.
Yes.